Blessings, good evening. We have a few questions have come in, so this is a chance to try and answer. So, first question. I practice meditation and read the Dhamma regularly. But I feel like I'm making no progress in my practice. What should I do? Well, obviously, keep practicing. Be mindful of the whatever that feeling is you've identified. Feelings of frustration, disappointment, maybe after all this effort. That's one part of dealing with this problem, isn't it? Just being aware of whatever you're thinking and feeling. This is part of the conditioning process. Maybe it's come up in other areas of your life as well. So just establish mindfulness, don't make that feeling worse. Don't let it condition more negative trains of thought. Feelings are impermanent, they arise, they pass away. What's impermanent is not a lasting self, it's a condition of mind, it's a feeling accompanied by a mental state. That's something to reflect on. But of course it may also be telling you something, so that's something you have to sit down maybe with yourself at some point when you've got a bit of time and just reflect on how you're practicing, what kind of effort you're putting in, how you actually, what you call practice, the actual daily activities that are to do with Dhamma practice, such as practicing generosity, keeping precepts, how much meditation you do, what kind of meditation you do, whether it's more samatha, calming the mind, developing states of calm, or vipassana, developing insight. Looking at the quality of your effort over time. Sometimes we try too hard and then we give up. Sometimes we don't try hard enough and maybe also give up. Looking at quality of effort. And then how do you judge progress when you say you don't feel you're making much progress? How are you judging that? If you set the bar really high, you say, I've got to attain jhana by the end of the year or something, then yep, you may well be disappointed with your progress if you haven't attained that. We tend to measure Dhamma practice by the concepts and labels and ideas that we've received from the books or the teachers, so we often feel we should be attaining something, samadhi, insight. I should be a sotapanna already, I should be enlightened already. And if we feel we're not, then we may feel disappointed and feel this effort we've been putting forth is going nowhere. Where does effort in the practice come from? It comes from this quality of skillful desire, kusala chanda, to practice, coming from faith and wisdom, seeing the need for practice, seeing the benefit. And that's what you have to come back to, cultivating the skillful effort and this quality, the willingness to practice, rather than focusing on results. Craving tends to be looking for certain results. You crave results, you have a passion and you want a state of samadhi, a state of bliss, a mind free from suffering, a mind without thought, all the different things we associate with success and achievement in practice, they can become the objects for craving. And craving, as we know, leads to clinging, leads to suffering. We can cling to the results and they can become a cause for suffering when we feel we haven't met those results or achieved them. So you come back to the doing of the practice, the mindfulness, the cultivating mindfulness, the mindfulness of precepts, the mindfulness of meditation object, the mindfulness of Dhamma. You're reflecting on impermanence, even reflecting on the impermanence of effort and faith and other qualities, how they wax and wane, they come up and they go down again. That's part of the practice, being willing to look at your own experience as objectively with mindfulness as you can, and not take it too seriously, not give too much importance to these feelings of you feel really good when things are going well and you're putting forth effort and you might experience some peace in your meditation. And then another time you feel like you're getting nowhere, you're back to square one, no mindfulness, no samadhi, no understanding, nothing, no peace. But just be mindful of that. Mindful when you're peaceful, mindful when you're not peaceful. And keep coming back to developing the skillful effort. And there may be things you can do, practical things you can do to help, so go on retreats. See where you can improve effort, maybe take up things like once a week or once in a while you keep the 8 precepts. Go on a retreat for 3 days, 7 days, 10 days, or even longer if you can. Plan it, work it out when you can do that. If it's monks, then we do things like we go and stay out in the forest and meditate in a very secluded place where there's wild animals and mosquitoes and the possibility of ghosts and things that go bump in the night. Tonight is Halloween, isn't it? So you do things that arouse energy and alert. You may bring up wakefulness and alertness in the practice. So sometimes you have to try new things, be creative. Sit longer, make a plan. If I can sit for a certain length of time, today I'm going to double that. If I can walk meditation for a certain period of time, today I will double that. And then you have to carry through with the plan, complete it. Push yourself a bit. Same with precepts. Try and see where your precepts are maybe shaky. Try to be more mindful and put effort into keeping the precepts, maybe take on more precepts like the 8 precepts if you're keeping the 5 precepts. And you can be more mindful of your speech, your activities. If you're obsessed or addicted with certain things, if you're addicted to surfing the net, well, cut it out. If you're following the Dhamma practice, you'll probably find surfing the net is a big waste of time and increases your defilements, doesn't reduce them. Increases your attachment to the idea of self, following different flimsy preferences, trying this, trying that, endless. You could surf the net all day, can't you? Play video games all day, look at sites that arouse sensuality, sexual desire all day, if you want. So the internet now is a huge obstacle for practitioners, but it's not the only obstacle, it's just one of many. Who you associate with. If you are feeling you're not getting anywhere, not making progress, well, associate with fellow practitioners who will help you a bit, give you good insights or reflections, good examples, talk about the Dhamma, encourage you to meditate more, practice more. find Kalyana Mitta, good teachers, good practitioners who can help to inspire you. It's not an end in itself. You have to go beyond inspiration and learn to inspire yourself, but from time to time it can be useful. A useful way to boost your practice. So you have to see what you can do. And remember, the last one I say is remember your life is fading away. We're not here forever. We're only alive for a certain period of time, and we don't know how much time we've got left. So have that sense of urgency in your practice, and don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today. Meditate today, learn the Dhamma today. Next question. Ajahn, why are Tibetan Lamas not practicing the same 227 Vinaya rules? Are they not categorized as bhikkhus? Well, I'm a Theravada forest monk, so I'm not an expert in Tibetan Lamas. I know the Lamas of the Yarra Valley, the furry, cuddly ones. So Tibetan Lamas means teacher, so we translate Lama as, in our tradition, Ajahn or Acharya. It means teacher, but you can have lay teachers and monk and nun teachers. So monastics can be teachers, lay people can be teachers, and Tibetan Lamas can be monastics or lay people. So you have to, if you meet a Lama, you have to ask them, what kind of Lama are you? Maybe they'll show you by their dress, but then even sometimes in the Tibetan tradition, they'll wear robes sometimes and lay clothes sometimes. So you have to question them, find out what their practice is, how many precepts they keep, bodhisattva vows, 5, 10 precepts, or the equivalent patimokkha, the 227 rules. So you really have to find out, because I believe there's a whole range of practices and precepts that Lamas take on, and some are lay Lamas, some are bhikkhu Lamas. And that's not to say one is good or bad, but it's just something you have to find out what their practice is, and they'll probably tell you if they're teaching you, because if they're a Lama, they're a teacher, then they'll tell you. And they may teach you very good things, and they may be very wise, peaceful people, but you have to find out by asking them. And really, in every tradition, that's something that applies. In Theravada tradition, you get various levels of, say, monastic discipline. Some monks will try to keep all the rules strictly, sincerely. Some relax the rules. Say in Thailand, in the city monasteries, there'll be certain rules they relax, that in the forest monasteries they won't relax. So that's something you have to investigate for yourself as you meet different teachers and become more experienced in practicing Buddhism and meeting teachers and maybe staying in monastic places. You'll find out more about this. Thing for you is, keep your precepts well. If you're keeping 5 precepts, try to keep them well. You'll benefit from that. They'll teach you something all the time. If you're keeping 8 precepts, try to keep them well. If you're a bhikkhu, keeping 227 precepts, and indeed many more precepts, keep them well, and this will lead you to good things. Another question. Ajahn, may I know why I am always falling into a situation where I think I know what is good for others, but that thing may not actually be beneficial for others? Well, if you use the word falling, if it's falling into any situation, I would suggest maybe that's a sign of being a bit too casual or even careless in your approach to life. You try not to fall. Falling we associate with missteps or not being aware of where you're going, not being careful enough in what you're doing, if you're talking about walking. So in terms of life, it may mean you're making missteps or you're not being mindful enough of these situations. So if it seems that you're trying to help others because you think you know what's good for them, and then it turns out to be a mistake or doesn't work out the way you intended, perhaps that's a sign that you don't yet know really what is good for yourself. Because what we know or believe may be good for others can only come from what we understand about ourselves. Perhaps this is the old question of, you can't really help others until you help yourself, or know how to help yourself. And as your practice develops and you understand yourself better, what are the causes of suffering, how to remedy them, abandon them, and bring up the causes for progress in the Dhamma, for developing peace and insight. As you do that better for yourself, well, then you'll understand better what may contribute to that same peace and freedom from suffering in others. And as you meet other people, you may see where they're going wrong or what mental defilements are coming up because you've seen those in yourself and you've learned how to abandon them yourself. So then you can tell others based on your own experience. But if you haven't done that yet, then what you tell others may be just based on idealism, guesswork, hearsay. It could be a range of things, but it's not coming from your direct experience, so then it's going to be shaky, perhaps. So it's like this simile of, you want to help someone out of the quicksand, you've got to stand on firm ground. Otherwise, if you're standing on quicksand and they're in quicksand, each one of you will pull each other down and you'll both be in trouble. So sometimes you have to make your own mind and understanding of Dhamma firm first before you can effectively help others. So if you are helping others, maybe go in small steps, in small ways, go gently, go cautiously, because you also remember that you're also teaching yourself and helping yourself. Don't go wading in too quickly, too fast, because you may make a mess of it. And you learn, don't you? So if you have helped someone and you thought what was good for them didn't turn out very well, learn from that, learn your lessons so you don't repeat the same mistake. Maybe you have to take a new approach. Some say, for example, a very common one is people who are suffering, say, from anxiety or depression, and someone says, go to the monastery and meditate in the monastery. And that may work in some situations, but sometimes they're not ready for that. They go to a monastery and it just gets worse because they've got all this time, no distraction, no stimulation, and maybe they don't know how to meditate, so their condition maybe gets worse in some cases. Sometimes meditation is not a cure-all. You say, you should be meditating more because you have your problems. But maybe that person has no background or basis in meditation. Maybe they haven't done it before, so perhaps they're not ready for it yet, perhaps. I'm not saying every case, but sometimes people need to do more basic things like volunteering or do some work or find skillful ways to help other people serve the community, serve society first, and they start to feel more relaxed and settle down, and then maybe they're ready to meditate. How you help other people is another thing, isn't it? You may go out to help someone and you do the wrong thing, or try and help them based on your opinion of what they need, and then maybe you're not very skilled and the help you offer is the wrong thing. It could be Can I think of an example of that? You go out and you give money to someone because they're short of money, but the reason they're short of money is they're gambling or drinking or taking drugs, and you give them money and they just spend it on their habit and it gets worse. It's a very common one. So the Buddha said, as you help others, practice compassion, you have to match that with wisdom, wise reflection. Look at what you're doing, look at the results of what you're doing, and be willing to adjust. And then through experience, you probably get better at it. Another question. Please, can you suggest ways to deal with feelings of sadness about the past? Let them go. Let go of the past. That's what the Buddha said. Abandon thoughts of the future, abandon thoughts of the past, dwell in the present moment. Not easy to do, but it's the guideline, isn't it? That's what we're practicing every day in meditation, bringing mindfulness up of the present. Thoughts about the past may arise, but you're looking at them from the lens of mindfulness, present moment awareness. So you know that's a memory, that's a thought about the past, and if it's a thought that is accompanied by any form of stress, suffering, unpleasant feeling, let it go. So what helps you to let go of having more awareness, more mindfulness, and then reflecting, this is the past, it's happened, I can't change the past, let it go. So you acknowledge it, but then you move on, let it go. And try and see what you're doing. If it's a habitual thing, you keep going back to the past, missing something. You know, say if you lose a person you love, you have to come to the point where you accept death is natural, normal, this person has gone, assuming that they've died. And you could lose them from some other way. They've moved away overseas or something and you're not seeing them. But you're accepting separation is part of life, coming to terms with the truth of that by really reflecting on it mindfully and seeing that just endlessly getting lost in feelings of sadness is suffering. It's not helping you. You have to come to terms with whatever it is that's hard to accept or that brings you sadness, come to terms with it, acknowledge it, and then let go. And also, if you focus on other aspects of the practice, cultivating generosity, kindness, sila, meditation, bringing your mind up with states of calm, this will help you to let go. Because as you develop a sense of well-being from your practice, it's easier to see where you need to let go and how to let go, because the sense of well-being allows you to look at things in a kind of sober, mature way and understand where you're going wrong in your thinking or where you're clinging to feelings of sadness, disappointment, etc. So you need to bring up the well-being. So you come back to the Dhamma, cultivating good karma, generosity, sila, meditation, listening to the Dhamma, associating with other people who do know how to let go. You know, teachers and Kalyana Mitta. It's much easier. You associate with someone like Ajahn, somebody who's like, you might say, an expert in letting go, including letting go of feelings of sadness. Then if you're clinging to feelings of sadness, often that becomes revealed or exposed very quickly because you realise, oh, he doesn't do that, why do I do this? You get a very good reflection if you're around people who have learnt their lessons. So that's one of the values of Sangha and practitioners and teachers. You visit them, spend time with them, listen to their teachings. It will remind you what you have to do. And they're hopefully a living example. So, you go to Ajahn or some other teacher, you go, oh, I'm so sad, or I'm missing this past, or this person, or that, I'm sad. I have all these thoughts of sadness, and you go, oh, it's just thought. it's just thought, no big deal. And they give you that reflection, because they're coming from that position. And it's like, oh, okay, and then you're more willing to accept it. Oh, a thought, it's just a thought, it's just a feeling. This is satipatthana. It may be gentle in the beginning, you're just saying the word, you still feel it and you still cling to that feeling, but they're giving you right view. The satipatthana is mindfulness of feeling. Feeling is just feelings. This is what the Buddha said, seeing the feeling in the feeling, meaning not attaching to it as self, not building it up into a person, a being, who you are. It's just a feeling, and what the feelings do, they arise, they pass away, and then they're gone. Even if they rise again, they still do the same thing again. They arise, they pass away. So feeling is just feeling. Thought is just thought. It's merely thought, nothing more. It follows its own duty. The duty of thoughts is to arise and cease. That's what they do. They're not a person, they're not a being, they're not me, you, they're thought. And thought is just, we say sankhara, it's just a mental formation doing its thing. You're aiming to get to that point. As you become more mindful, you see thought as just thought. Then you can let go. Ajahn, I have two questions. One, when someone committed suicide, where will they get reborn to? In Mahayana tradition, they say that this only leads to rebirth in the hell realm. But is this absolute? Well, every sect or school of Buddhism may have their particular emphasis and nuances in explanations, but obviously if someone is in the unfortunate position they're suicidal, they're suffering a lot, because it's pretty much the worst thought you can have as a human being, isn't it? You're turning on yourself. And it's coming from delusion, it's coming from this sort of deluded thought, if I end my life, I end my suffering. This is the way out, this is the solution. But they're wrong. It doesn't end there, because often it's backed by the belief that when you die, everything finishes, stops. But it doesn't. But that's something you really have to reflect on more and more. Obviously, it's hard to reflect. If someone's suicidal, they may not be able to do that. But if they can get some teaching and reminder of the Dhamma, that may help. So we give help, don't we? We assist out of compassion, try to get people to listen to good Dhamma if they're going in that direction. And it becomes a real habit of mine with suicide. When people are suicidal, they keep going to that same intention, thinking that's the way out of the problem, that's the solution. It's a kind of downward spiral. It's a very kind of habitual response to their suffering. So it becomes a view, a deeply embedded view. So you're trying to help them see another way, look at their problem and look at the situation in another way, get a little bit of detached awareness. So mindfulness, so hearing Dhamma, giving them support, kindness of course, and often getting them at least temporarily out of the situation they were in, which is producing these thoughts. So often they're in a place of suffering, aren't they? They're addicted to something, drink, gambling, they're in a relationship which is very abusive or difficult, they've lost all their money, their business has failed, whatever it is, you try and get them out of that situation to a better place, materially, spiritually, emotionally, so that they can reflect back and say, well, okay, it was bad, but it's not so bad that we need to kill ourselves. So this is one of the worst thoughts a human being can have, and the idea is, from the Buddhist explanation, is that thought doesn't just disappear, and that negativity and we say the karma of it doesn't just disappear when you die, it goes with you. It's still affecting or conditioning your consciousness. The body stops working, that's what suicide is, it's taking it out on your body. But the body is not the mind, the body is just a physical thing. So you hurt the body, but the mind is still there. Sometimes I tell the story of the Anagarika we once had in Thailand who came from overseas, and he was suicidal. He was Buddhist, not by birth, he was Catholic, strict Catholic, brought up as strict Catholic by birth, and his parents always wished for him to be a practicing Catholic, and they were Central American, so Spanish origin Catholics, wealthy farming family. But he was a bit different from his relatives. He was really interested in exploring other religions and philosophy, and he went to university, did a great degree in philosophy, if I remember right, and he sort of turned his back on a lot of his parents' beliefs and his culture. So he's a little bit struggling with that and with his relationships with other people and the culture he'd been brought up in. And he turned to Buddhism as a way out from his sort of struggles and disappointments with his own family and culture, and he found a great faith and happiness studying Buddhism. And then he thought, I've got to practice Buddhism, which at that time in the Caribbean, there wasn't much Buddhism. This is 40 or almost 40 years ago. So he, having practiced a little bit of Buddhism in America, he travelled to Thailand, and he was in Bangkok. He's a very wealthy man, a wealthy family, so he's in the top hotel in Bangkok. Which one is it? A Dusit Thani or one of those ones, the big fancy hotels, penthouse suite, lots of money. And then he goes to some of the Bangkok temples, which are in the city. They're very busy, they're surrounded by shops, they've got market stalls in the temple. He couldn't find anyone to speak English, teach him meditation, so he started to feel really depressed that Buddhism is no longer practiced in any meaningful way, and he couldn't speak Thai anyway, so he's really depressed. So he went back, one thing led to another, he went back to his room, his suite in the hotel, and he slashed his wrists, unfortunately, and he was sitting in the bath, did it in that way. He lie down in the bath, filled it with water, slashed his wrists, and just lay there waiting to die. And he went unconscious. And then he said this, obviously he didn't die because he told us later. But anyway, at that time he went unconscious, his mind left his body, and he floated up. As you hear these sort of out-of-body experiences, and he's looking back at his body lying in the bath, and before he had slashed his wrists, he had all this depression, aversion, disappointment with the world. Buddhism can't help him, nothing can help him. He's just turning on himself, just wants to end it all, slash his wrist. Now he floats out of his body, looking back, and he sees the body lying there, dying, and this is the mind, so he's become aware that I'm still here, floating, looking at my body. And then he noticed all the feeling of despair, anguish, disappointment, depression was still there in his mind. All the negativity was still there. It's just there's no body now, mind and body are separated, but all the suffering that had led him to that terrible act of slashing his wrist was still there. It didn't end with the act of killing himself. It goes on with the mind. The mind is still being conditioned, I guess, ready for its next life. But this guy has some merit, we say, some good karma. So the blood congealed, he came back into his body, and eventually the hotel staff, somehow, I don't know how, got to him. They broke the door down, I believe, got to him, took him to hospital, So he's recovering in hospital. He woke up and he told his story to the doctors, and one of the doctors spoke good English, and he said, you should go to Ajahn monastery because they have lots of Western monks who speak English there, and they practice meditation very sincerely, and they can teach you Buddhism. Don't give up. So lucky, a good doctor. So he did, and he walked in to the monastery one day, in the forest monastery, and he walked up to me by chance. I was the one he met, and he just told me his story, and I said, oh, this is a pretty tough story. And he rolled up his sleeve, showed me his slashed wrist. I said, oh yes, this is true, he's not making it up. And he lived in this monastery, if I remember, many months as an anagarika, learning meditation, practicing, until his whole mindset improved and he felt strong enough. Eventually he went home, his visa ran out, and he went home. But he, as far as I know, he was a changed man. And he said he had this insight when he was dying, his mind separating from body. He said, what a fool I am to take it out on my body. It didn't work, it didn't change the suffering. And that's the word he used with me, is that I was a fool. That was not the way. So he had enough insight to realize that, it would seem, and hopefully went on to better things. I didn't keep in touch with him myself, so I don't know. But if you don't have that kind of insight, well, you're stuck with a lot of anguish, depression that has led up to this act of suicide. So then that will follow you into the next life. Wherever you're reborn, it's going to be a place where the suffering continues, at least for a while, isn't it? So this is why we make merit for the dead, and if someone commits suicide, out of compassion, we often will meditate for them, make merit for them, dedicate the merit to them, wishing for them to lift their mood of depression, suffering, to lift for some spark of something better to come up in their mind. And at some point it will. At some point they'll be reborn in a better place, but their first rebirth is bound to be a place of suffering because they're suffering when they die. Question number 2. Where does time, space, and thinking end? Is that what an arahant has attained? Well, the Dhamma is timeless. We chanted it tonight, Akaliko. Sometimes they say one who is an arahant, who reached Nibbana, their mind has become Dhamma. Sometimes they call it the Dhamma Dhatu, the Dhamma element. The mind is just is, without any defilement, without any clinging to self, without any karma, without rebirth, without birth and death anymore. The mind is free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So it's with the Dhamma all the time. So it's with the timeless. Space and thinking. Well, they say an arahant can think, but they can also not think. They have mastery of their mind, so they can choose to just dwell in emptiness and peace, or they can think. When they need to think, they think, but not in that usual way where you're being dragged around by all your thoughts, the distracted monkey mind. They can use their mind to consider things, understand things, learn things, and usually they're using their thinking to help people out of compassion and wisdom. They're teaching the Dhamma and helping people. But there's no identification with thought as self anymore. It's separate. So this thought becomes like just a tool or a function of mind, not a defilement anymore. Space, well, as long as they've got a body, they've got space. That's one of the elements, agasa dhatu, the space element. Even a body has space. You got nostrils, you got ear holes, you got space between things in your body. So there is space around, but when the Arahant dies, they no longer have a body and they don't come back for rebirth. So then they separate from the 4 elements, or the 6 elements. They separate from the 6 elements that make up a human being: earth, air, fire, water, space, and consciousness. So where does it end? Well, it ends with Nibbana, I guess, would be a sort of simple description, but you also have to practice to reach Nibbana to prove that or verify that. So keep practicing. Some questions. I have a question for tomorrow. Tomorrow is now today, you see. Dhamma is timeless. Were all the stories about pretas and hell realms that are in the suttas real? Did the Buddha tell all these stories? Thank you, Ajahn. Well, obviously the suttas have come to us over 2,500 years. Originally they were recited and memorized, first by Venerable Ananda, we believe, handed down by successive generations of monks, eventually written down, and come down to the present day. We have the Theravada, early Buddhist texts, and later texts, and additions, commentaries, of course. There's the Mahayana texts, the Chinese texts, the Agamas, all kinds of texts. So it's so long ago that they were recorded, who can be absolutely sure were they recorded accurately? But there's a lot of good stuff in them, so don't dismiss them. But which bit is the word of the Buddha or not? There's always a bit of controversy about that, some arguments about what is earlier and later. Some of the later stuff maybe is additional. But as I said, there's a lot of good stuff in there, so just make use of what works for you, gives you understanding, and listen to teachers, read books that help point you in the direction of the suttas and help explain them or bring them to life sometimes. And you can use them. And yes, the Buddha did on occasions get asked about ghosts and making merit for the dead and who can receive merit and these kind of things, and hell realms. Sometimes, there's Venerable Moggallana is considered the foremost in psychic ability, and so he was the one people would ask, what's it like in heaven realms, hell realms, past lives? Do you see ghosts? All those kind of questions. Because he's so skilled at it. And occasionally he was asked, and then the Buddha had to confirm, because some people don't believe, don't they? It's normal. You can't see these things, so you might reject. If a monk says, oh, there are ghosts, there are heaven realms, there are hell realms, you can't see, so people often reject what they can't see. And even a great monk like Moggallana might be asked a question, give an answer, and then they reject it. So then maybe the Buddha steps in and say, well, actually he is telling the truth. That's what has come down to us, handed down through suttas. Some of it is in the commentaries, but in the suttas there's a bit as well. So you just have to trust in that lineage of the suttas, and if you're a scholar, well, maybe you can read a bit more, find out more, if that's your interest. But in this modern era, well, we've had, and still have, monks and nuns who meditate and have developed psychic powers, usually based on jhana. And some are quite skilled, so one monk who used to come here, Lumpur Blien, was very skilled with this side of things, so he would tell us some of his own experiences, and he would say, yes, there are hell realms, heaven realms, hungry ghost realms, the preta realms. And if you live with a monk, practice with him, trust in his wisdom, well, you realize he's not deluded, he's not trying to trick you. It's not absolute verification of these things, but it's one thing that can help. So he would tell us, something. Sometimes I tell the story. He mentioned about there's one preta that the Buddha saw on Kichikuta mountain in India that's recorded. Why the Buddha was smiling is because he saw a preta as he's coming down the hill, a hungry ghost. And then Luang Por Blien said, that hungry ghost is still there. It's been around a long time, because those realms, sometimes they're there for a long time. Human years, a long time. So ghosts can be around for hundreds of years. You go to England, all those castles and stately homes full of ghosts, obviously been there hundreds of years. There's ghosts all over the place. It's just we can't see them, but sometimes people can. One of the reasons they're there is nobody makes merit for them, or they haven't received the merit. The karma is so strong to be reborn in that realm. They haven't come out of that realm yet, being reborn. So yes, the Buddha did tell some of these stories. Other teachers like Mahamoggallana also, and then in the modern era we have practitioners also confirming them. But if you're skeptical, can keep an open mind, that's fine until you have your own experience. Last question. Why is it hard to contemplate death? Well, we don't like death. Nobody wants to die because we're attached to life, we're attached to this body, we're attached to all the things we can do with it. We're attached to sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, what we call the sensual realm, the Kamaloka. We want more sights and tastes and smells and touches. We don't want death. And there's some people, even if I start talking about contemplation of death, they say, no, don't talk. Shh. They don't want to hear because it makes them feel uncomfortable. Some of those people, they say, the more you talk about it, the more likely it will happen. But we're not just talking, are we? We're reflecting with mindfulness. So it's a meditation object that you can use. And many monks, Luang Por Anand used it as his main meditation object when he began practice. Many other monks have used it. It's a very skillful way to bring the mind to calm and cultivate strong mindfulness, because it cuts through all the frivolous thoughts, all the planning and scheming about the future, all this desiring and getting caught up in sensual desire. It helps to cut through that when you reflect on the finality of death. Everything is impermanent and this body will die. Everyone you know and love will die and you'll separate from them. Brings your mind right to the present moment. And the Buddha said, I reflect on death every breath in, every breath out. I'm contemplating death or impermanence. So it can be a very useful way to cut through a lot of endless, restless states of mind. But it's difficult because it's going in the opposite direction of what we are normally thinking and directing our mind to. Our mind is directed towards craving, clinging, becoming, birth. So if you read the Paticca Samuppada, the teaching on dependent origination, you'll see this series of causal links leading up to birth, and we're normally involved with that, seeking out pleasant feelings, pleasurable experiences, things that make us happy, success, the worldly dhammas, fame, fortune, money, power, different kinds of pleasure, reputation, all the kinds of things we associate with success. We're always seeking that, and death is the opposite, isn't it? It's the impermanent ending of those things. When you're dead, it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter how many likes you're getting on your Facebook page when you're dead. It doesn't matter how much money you got in the bank when you're dead. It doesn't matter about where you're going on holiday next year when you die. all the things we normally fill our mind with no longer matter when you bring up death. So it's a hard one to do, but if you ease into it, try a little bit every day, it can be very enlightening. It's a process of awakening to the truth, and it's quite possible to be contemplating the impermanence of life and the impermanence of everything and everybody that you love and like, with a mind that is peaceful, recognizing impermanence, without suffering, without panicking, being afraid. You may go through that from time to time, but as you become more familiar with the theme of death and use it as a meditation, all that fades. And when you have continuous mindfulness on an object, even if it's the object of death, marananusati, it's peaceful. So they say somebody who's peaceful in meditation is not afraid of death. So if you learn to meditate, whether it's on the object of death contemplation or the breath or the Buddha or loving kindness, anything, if you develop that, when you do get close to death, if you're still conscious and awake, you can do it to calm your mind right up to the moment when you die. And that will be a great gift to yourself, a great thing, because if you can keep your mind peaceful, calm, free from panic and fear as you're getting close to death and as you die, well, your mind is in the best possible state. Can also help you clear out other things like anguish and hatred, because if you reflect on death, you realize it doesn't matter. No need to hold a grudge, no need to hate someone. We're all going to die anyway. They're going to die, I'm going to die. So it can help you clear up all kinds of emotional problems, greed, anguish, delusions, the delusion that you're going to live forever, the delusion of trying to outrun death, escape death, all kinds of things. So if you can familiarize yourself with this reflection, the perception of death, bring it up a lot, it'll actually bring you great wisdom and peace. And compassion, because you'll also understand how other people are also afraid of death, and they'll be kind of doing all kinds of things because of their fear of death, which may actually bring them more suffering. And if you really reflect on death, then wars become unnecessary, because we're all going to die anyway, and there's no need to kill other people, if you really see this. Of course, a lot of people don't. So yes, it is a difficult one, but that doesn't mean to say you can't do it. Just bring it up frequently, often, ease into it, and you may find it very rewarding. So that's enough for tonight, and we wish you well in your practice, and see you again next time.